welcome to ECCB Connects. This week we'll be discussing the investment opportunities that are available through the Eastern Caribbean Securities Exchange. I have with me Mr. Trevor Blake, Chief Executive Officer of the Eastern Caribbean Securities Exchange. Mr. Blake, welcome to ECCB Connects.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be here.
Mr. Blake, the Eastern Caribbean Securities Exchange, we call it the ECSE, is a sister institution of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, that institution being established in 2001. What was the thinking behind establishing such an institution?
Thank you for that question. The ECCB had done a diagnostic of the financial sector in the Eastern Caribbean, looking at the gaps that existed. And one of the major gaps was access to financing for businesses in the productive sectors. And we are talking about the appropriate types of financing so that companies could develop and generate activity, all geared towards the development of the economies of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. While I should say that the financial system was largely bank-centric. Bank financing has its role, but it is not sufficient in terms of developing an economy. We need different forms of financing. We need different forms of different arrangements, different types of markets in the economies to actually achieve the potential of the economies and have the development and to get the development that you need in terms of moving the economies forward. A study was done by the World Bank, and it was a number of institutions and markets were identified as critical for ensuring that process of development. Out of that study, we had first the Home Mortgage Bank being created in 1996. Then we went forward and then created the exchange and the securities market to enable companies that needed financing for development or equity financing to be able to obtain that, and also to provide avenues for investment for the peoples of the region. We started critically to develop all of the market institutions, the exchange, the depository, and the registry, which come together to create that whole environment for the issuance, trading, redemption of securities, equities, and debt within an organized market infrastructure.
How then does the ECSE fulfill its mandate in terms of its role in development, economic development?
The ECSE provides an avenue for, one, companies to issue securities, and these could be equities where capital is provided to the companies for their development, or debt where, again, they could raise financing and to repay over time to these investors. It also enables investors to participate in the ownership of the productive sectors of the economy. For small investors or small investors who may not be able to establish a company, they could acquire ownership in various companies by buying the securities that the equities that these companies issue, and participate in the ownership and get the returns that the companies generate over time through the dividends. And in the case where they invest in debt securities, one, they would get the interest, which tends to be higher than what they would normally get on the ordinary savings that most people would invest in. So it provides investment opportunities on one hand, and it provides financing opportunities on the other hand for companies.
You mentioned securities and equities. Explain that a bit for us in terms of what's available on the ECSE.
Equities are one form of securities. Securities run the gamut from ordinary shares in companies, preference shares in companies, debt, including short-term commercial paper, longer-term notes, and bonds that could have maturities up to maybe as much as 30 years. So securities is the broad generic name for all these types of financial assets that are traded on unorganized exchanges. In the Eastern Caribbean, we trade mainly debt and equities. Of course, we have the capability of trading any form of equity, of securities, but currently what is on issue and available in the market are equities, being shares of companies, and debt securities, both as debt securities issued by companies and those issued by governments.
Traditionally, our people believe in saving. They will put their money at a commercial bank and they're confident that it's safe. Do you think the people of our region have an appetite for investing?
Well, there's a trade-off between risk and return. If one is purely or purely interested in safety, then one perhaps should stay with bank deposits. However, as you know, the bank deposits rates are very low. The maximum you get is 2% on savings deposit, and on fixed deposits, sometimes some banks even quote under 1%. If one invests in financial assets, those traded on the ECSE, one is able to get a better rate of return. If you invest in equities, you get dividend income over time. The companies make profits, and out of those profits, they pay dividends. You also get what we call capital appreciation. That is the increase in value of the shares over time. All the shares that are listed on the ECSE have all increased in value from the time they were listed to current times. So over time, the value of your investment in those shares increase, and that continues over the life of the instrument. Sometimes you have periods where the prices could fall, but over time, on average, these shares increase in value. So you have a double return in terms of the capital gains, and you have the dividend that is paid out over time. I did mention earlier that there's a trade-off between risk and return. There's risk. There's risk that the company may not pay dividend. There's no guarantee of dividend in any particular period. But all of the companies that are listed on the ECSE pay dividends, in most years. Not in sometimes, especially when we went through the recession in the late 2008 up to those 3 years, those rough 3 years. We had some companies that had withheld dividends because the performance was not that strong. Most of these companies have resumed paying dividends, and over time, investors in these company shares would have been getting their returns, which would be far superior to what they would have gotten on any bank deposit.
You mentioned risk, and you identified one as a company may not pay dividend. What other risks people need to consider?
There's also the risk of loss, of course. It's an investment. When you buy shares in a company, you're investing in what we call risk capital. So the company may become insolvent, and there will be no return for you. But that is a more remote possibility than a company, a normal trading company, a normal manufacturer or something like that, perhaps going bust because of the business cycle, and you lose your investment. But we try to ensure when we list companies that they are strong companies, going concerns that have a record of making profits. So we don't list any company that comes to us. We look at the companies. We have listing requirements that require, for example, for our large capitalization tier to have been in business for at least 5 years, have been making profits in at least 2 of the last 3 years, that have a record of paying dividends, that have a record of good governance, have a record of good performance, so that the risk to the investor is minimized. Of course, we can't eliminate it completely, but we try to ensure that the companies are strong companies that are committed to good governance, that strong performers. We also ensure that over the period of the listings, the companies make the adequate disclosures. The regulations governing the exchange and securities business securities business overall require companies to meet a continuing disclosure requirements that requires the company to disclose all the financial performance and any material events that affect the companies, so that investors have information on which they are able to make decisions as to the credit worthiness of the companies that they would wish to invest in, and the strength and solvency of these companies.
In short, you're saying the ECSE is a viable option, a viable investment option for the people of our region.
Absolutely. I encourage the entire population of the 8 ECCU member countries and those beyond to look at investing on the ECSE. We have a range of product that is available to you. We have companies listed from across the region. We have companies in various sectors. We have companies in the financial sector. We have companies in distribution. We have utilities, etc. So it's a range of companies that are listed that provides a significant degree of diversification to enable investors to spread their risk across a number of instruments.
Mr. Blake, we're out of time, but we'll definitely continue this discussion in our next program. Thank you very much for speaking with us on ECCB
Thank you for
Connects.
the opportunity.
You're watching ECCB Connects, protecting our currency, developing our region. And now for this week's financial tip.
Set financial goals.
Make a plan of how you want to use your money.
To view any episode of ECCB Connects, anytime, any place, at your convenience, check out our YouTube channel, ECCB Connects.
We've come to the end of this week's episode of ECCB Connects, but do join us again next week when we'll continue our discussion on the Eastern Caribbean Securities Exchange, and we'd look at what you need to do if you wish to invest in the ECSE.